All right. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of the Business Blind Spots Exposed podcast. We've got people connecting in from all over the place. So, the first thing I would ask is if you're listening in, please tell us who you are and where you're connecting in from. We've got people who connect from all over the world, most from the United States. Love to see who you are and if you will even care to tell us what you're listening in for. I would love to hear that, and it would help Ross and I shape this conversation to serve you better in answering questions. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about the Business Blind Spots podcast. For me personally, I've found that when I've run companies, the better I understand what's happening in my company, the better I can make decisions. But if I don't know what is happening in my company, I don't know the narratives, the stories, or sort of the subcultures that are running in my company, I can't control it, and I'm probably being hurt by it somehow because it's going to blindside me. So as soon as I started asking others, "Hey, what's going on in your company today?" and then, that's happening in my company too, I started getting smarter. The purpose of the Blind Spots podcast is to start hearing from industry veterans, experts, coaches, people who just have been there and done that, to start sharing some of those stories. And that's why I bring the people who I do to the podcast, so they can share some of the stories and narratives that they have seen. And hopefully it helps you. So let me tell you about a couple people we've got coming in next couple weeks, and I want to introduce Ross. So I'm really excited to talk to today. Hey, Ross, how you doing today, by the way?
I'm doing great, man. Happy to be here and have this discussion with you for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited about some of the nuggets that you're probably going to be dropping throughout the course of this. So let me introduce some of the people that are coming up. July 13th, I've got Ben Wyant. The topic of that podcast is culture. How do things get done around here? So many people talk about culture, but gosh, if culture is not something that you accidentally get to, it's something that you work on. Ben's going to talk about how do you start to shape that culture so stuff gets done. I talk about the 300-watt light bulb versus the 300-watt laser. You want to be a 300-watt laser, and you got to focus to get there. On July 1st, I got Cindy Foy Euler, and she's going to talk about what I've learned in 20 years of operations. Gosh, after 20 years, she said, yeah, there's a couple of cuts, bruises, and scars and things that I've seen. Maybe there might be a thing or two you might be able to get out of that might be happening in your organization as well. So I encourage you to tune in to listen to Cindy. On June 29th, Jeremy Columbic is coming to talk about seeing the data behind risk as an opportunity in business. Most people pay insurance, and it's like rent. It goes out the door, you'll never see it again. Jeremy's going to talk about how you can invest in that risk and actually build equity, just like buying a house. You don't have to walk away from that money. You can actually get it to come back and work for you. So that's on June 29th. Jeremy's going to come and talk about that. But today, I got Ross Mawhinney from Lobster Marketing, and the topic is data-driven insights into customers. I'll talk about myself personally. I can't tell you how many times I like to think I know what my customers want. The only way to really find out is to ask and to listen and to study. So I'm excited about having Ross here because I think he's going to be able to tell us a little bit about that and kind of what he and his company do in marketing do around that. But let me introduce you to Ross and give you a little bit of background who he is, and then I'll be quiet for a little bit because I think you want to hear from Ross. So what I've learned about Ross is that he's from an entrepreneurial family, working in and around milling, construction, just lots of what I'll call the blue collar industry type roles and jobs. He started his first business at 16 in construction. I think I heard windows and siding. Is that right?
Yeah, mostly, yeah, anything, yeah.
So,
whatever somebody would pay a 16-year-old to do, we did.
opportunistic at the greatest, right?
Had my first employees then too. I don't think that was quite legal, but we did it. So.
I love it. I'm sure there's I call it the 5 beer conversation. At some point in time, we'll have to do 5 beers. I'm sure there's a lot of conversation.
Sounds good.
But it seemed like over time, marketing is what you've always been drawn to. So you joined in 2014, you joined Lobster Marketing. You didn't start it, but you joined in. And as a result of sort of the impact that you've had in the company, you've now moved into the CEO role of Lobster Marketing. Seems like from a person who started at 16, starting their own company, hanging siding, windows and doing siding, to CEO of Lobster Marketing. Seems like it must have been a fun journey so far. Is that a
Well,
good word to put on it?
yeah, I wouldn't call it orthodox for sure. It's definitely been an interesting journey for sure. It's been definitely my own story, but yeah, it's been quite a journey. A lot of different experiences. It's been great. So
So let's talk about customers, right? This idea of customer discovery, it's something that, in all the companies I've run, I had an idea. I said, here's a solution. I'm going to do this for somebody. Then I go out and, build it and they will come, as Kevin Costner said in the movie, right? They don't. They don't show up. They're, they're too busy with their own shit. So, how do you, you run a marketing company for a lot of pest control companies focused specifically on pest control. How do you tune that thinking for people in terms of you build it and they come, they don't? How do you get people to show up at your doorstep saying, hey, I need some of that?
yeah, it's an interesting position that we're in because we do represent a ton of pest control companies, so we're able to focus in, on that specific consumer. But I think there's some pieces that are pretty much standard in this world, whether you're a service or you're e-commerce or whatever you're doing. And at this point, the gate for us and for most people is Google, right? It is search, and so you got to understand, I think, that your customer is theirs first. Ultimately, it's Google's customer first, and they're trying to put in front of their customer the best product they can. And so you've ultimately got to show Google that you're the best product that they can put in front of that customer. And so in pest control, the two largest methods of growth are obviously, one, digital marketing, and in attracting the customers to your business through a simple search term, which is pest control near me, and voice search that's dominating now. But then it's also still, the biggest pest control companies that are growing the fastest are still door knocking, and so they're sending a lot of people door to door. But it's still very much a data-driven process. There's a ton of data now that's going into that process of putting you onto the right door. And so, for us, it is a balance between science and mathematics and trying to deconstruct what Google determines as their best customer, and art, and how do you paint a picture that you are that best customer. And that's the interesting world of marketers, where they live in this realm of a combination of those two things, of science and art. And so again, that first realization that, man, Google has a customer, they're trying to deliver the best product they can to that customer, and that's how they're viewing you. And so your business, a lot of the older way of thinking about things is, I got my sign, I got my storefront. As a service company, my business is what you see when you walk up, or what you experience when you get on the phone with someone. And ultimately, at this point, the way that commerce has moved, it's who Google views you as. It's who your virtual representation of yourself is, that Google is looking at, and is really, at this point saying, no, who you are virtually is who you really are. What people are saying about you, and what we can find out about you virtually, that's who you really are at this point. So that's just a huge shift that's happened in the last 15 years that has been dramatic.
So I hope you don't mind. I'm jotting down notes as I'm kind of learning things here. And the first thing that I heard is, and I'm kind of distilling this into kind of take-home messages here, right? Blind spots. The first is that Google is the gatekeeper, right? That is a fundamental shift in thinking. You got to think Google is the gatekeeper, and if they're the gatekeeper, I'm thinking back when I was younger and I used to go to bars a lot. The bouncer at the door, if he's going to let me in front of the line, he or she is going to let me in front of the line, what do I know about them on their terms? So they'll say, yeah, but now you don't have to stand behind 400 people. Go ahead, right? You get to the front of the line. So you need to have that relationship with Google, at least understand what they're looking for. And once you start to think like that, that's when you'll start to push up in that ranking, right? And I love that elegant way of describing that. But the second part I heard is it's a balance between the science and the math. Google is a massive, massive company by many, many definitions. You're not going over there and shaking a hand and sliding a 20 to the guy so that he lets you in the door, right?
No, that's right.
They care about the numbers, right? So how are you putting the numbers in front of them so that they say, yeah, this one gets through, Am I wrapping that up the right way?
Yeah, no, that's correct. Yep. Yep. It makes a lot of sense.
So this is, as a company, that's what you guys do, right? You guys sit there and you guys are pals with the bouncer. I don't know how to get to the bouncer analogy, but it seems to be working.
We just watch them all, that one went in, that one didn't, that one went in, that one didn't, right? And then try to make the conclusions about why and recreate that, right? So
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
So to break it down for me a little bit more, right? Because
Mhm.
I mean, and I think this is where the analogy starts to come apart in my mind. It's not one bouncer, right? Because Google is the bouncer, but there's lots of different geographies. There's lots of different types of services, lots
Yep.
of different types of consumers. And walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, so an interesting piece of the local search. So if you're a service company, Google there's a whole different world of SEO that is in existence now, which is local SEO. And so you have a Google My Business listing or GMB listing. And so you can think of that as you used to have a single homepage on the internet or a single website. And now you have at least two. If you have a single location, then you've got two. You've got your website, your homepage, but then you have your Google My Business listing, which is their page that they have dedicated to you for you to talk about yourself and for them to display information that they can gather on you. And they over the last 5 years have opened that up more and more to manipulation. Of course, marketers love to manipulate things, so that's where we find our in. And so at this point you can go in and manipulate those listings to better represent you and the message that you're trying to get across. And so what Google's then is going to do is look at all these different factors, and of course we don't know exactly what these factors are, but we know some rank higher. The reviews that you have, if customers aren't happy with you, then they're not going to put you in front of their customers. The amount of information that you're presenting, how many of their customers have you helped in the past, all those types of things. But then also, what is the information you're presenting to Google and allowing them to display to that customer? All of those pieces get put together into an opinion of you that Google has. And then they're going to determine whether this person is searching and trying to solve their problem, if you're the one that's going to answer that or not. So there's two worlds now that you kind of have to optimize for. The one is the website, and you can't separate them. Google's looking at them both at the same time. But one is your website, and the other is this Google listing that's happening. And so the goal is to identify what are the best practices that Google's looking for, and I think that's the science side of it. Of what are the best practices. I know that if I have no reviews or poor reviews, I need to work on that if I want Google to put me in front of my customers or their customers. I know that if I don't have a website with any content or anything that's been happening for a number of years, then Google's going to look at me as a little stagnant, and they're going to ding me for that. So I'm looking for, do I have errors on my sites? Do I have problems that the searcher is going to run into? And trying to determine, okay, how do I bring my presence into best practices? There's some standard best practices. And so that's the science side. You got to go through the boxes and check them on a very basic level of, am I meeting the best practices? But then the art side is really more about who that individual business is. And so even like in our situation where we work with so many different pest control companies, it's really amazing that they're not the same. Even companies that you would think are very much the same offer similar services. The way they talk about themselves, the way they want to interact with their customers, those things are different. And so that's the artistic side, where you're trying to take the real personality of that individual business and represent that on top of those best practices that Google has put together out there. And so, for me, kind of an interesting story that ties to the blind spots is that my first interactions with SEO, search engine optimization, the first time I ever heard that term, I think I was probably like 18, 19, and my father had a wholesale and mail order. So actually put the brochures in the mail and send them out. Christmas wreath business, so Maine Christmas wreaths. And he was trying to, without any knowledge of a computer really, figure out how he's going to sell online, because everybody was doing that. This had been late 90s, And so he paid a guy from Portland, Maine, $4,000, and that guy was going to get him to the top of Google, And So I think he might have made page 17 of Bing or something like that, but he never made top of Google. So he paid that guy again. The next year he rolls around. I remember having a conversation with my dad, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to pay this guy." I said, "Well, Dad, it didn't really work out for you last time. What did you get back from it?" "I don't know. And so he paid him again. He didn't pay him a third time. But what I realized there was, man, there's this world of expertise out there that people get away with this, where they provide you something, there's no idea of what you're getting back for it. And I think businesses even today are still full of a ton of areas like that, where they're doing something and they're not sure what they're getting back for it. So just wanted to share that with you. That's actually how I got into SEO. So
that actually leads to a question that's been kind of come in front of mine as you've been talking about this. I mean, this whole idea of SEO, you said you first met that word in, when you were 17, 18. SEO has been around for a while, right? Google kind of really coined that and pushed that, propagated that term out to everybody. But it seems like every time they're making things familiar, the bar continues to rise as the sophistication that they expect of people continues to rise. I mean, this is probably like a broad brushstroke analogy here, but gosh, navigating healthcare 20 years ago, you go to your doctor, you pay them, right? Yeah. Now, I mean, I've got primary insurance, I've got secondary insurance, I've got, you could have Aflac, you get, this, that, and the other. And who do I go see? Am I going to go see my general physician first? You got specialists. It's so complicated now, right?
It is.
And I think that's part of what's happened here is that it's not what you used when you were 17, 18 is wrong. It's just that it's not enough to get you in the door anymore.
Yeah. So actually, when I came into Lobster, we had been in business for 5 or 6 years, I think, at that point. And one of the things that we recognized early on, and I started to work on was SEO specifically, because we were a little bit broader in our focus as an agency at that time. And yet we were doing about the same thing we were doing 5 or 6 years previous. And already, it was just at that point, it was results were starting to be reduced out of the same efforts. And so, that was 2014, like I said, so that was seven years ago. Now, if you were to wait 5 years and do the same thing, you'd be out of business. It is changing that fast now, where there's hundreds of updates to Google a year. And so there's just a tremendous amount of complexity to it. And we're not done, right? Where they're going with AI is that there's coming a day here, not too far from now, where no one at Google will be able to tell you what the secret sauce is either, because it'll be all AI driven. And once they launch that, within a matter of hours, nobody will know. So we're going towards more complexity. But so I think there's two ways to combat that. One is to both are probably necessary. One is to really try to continue to track down that complexity and categorize it, search through it, and find areas that that you can manipulate or that you can attack. And the other is to double down on the best practices that have worked for a long time, which is building a good business and making sure that business is represented correctly online. And so I think both of those probably have to happen. We're in the business of trying to do both, of trying to make sure those best practices are followed, but also we obviously spend a lot of resources on tracking what Google's doing and making sure that our platform and our services are up to stuff with it. But if you're on your own, I think at this point, as a business owner, and you are just expecting that with little effort you're going to keep up with what's going on, I think that's a really difficult place now, even more so than it was 5-10 years ago, for sure. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, we call this data-driven insights into customers, right? And the purpose is we're starting to understand a little bit, and what we've been talking about here is this platform that you've got to really use as the launching pad to get to understand your customers. Tell me about, I'll give it to you as this way. Talk to me about sophistication of the customers that you all work with, like on a scale of 1 to 10. How sophisticated do you think that customer is? 10 as in, man, I've got this stuff. I got it in my back pocket. I know it. I don't think anybody does, is the honest answer.
Right. Yeah.
Where do they start sophistication-wise? Is it a 1, 2, 3? Is it a 7, right? And where do they move to as they kind of come through and work with you all in that sophistication process?
Yeah, so obviously there's outliers to any generalization. So we do work with people who are very skilled, some at SEO, and they just reached a point in their business life cycle where they can't do it anymore. And so we have
It's not
those.
what they want to do, right? Yeah.
It's not what they want to do, and so we have those. Those are fewer and more far between than the normal, which is in our industry very often a guy who worked for one of the big guys, a Terminex and Orkin or something like that, and now they've gone out on their own and they've started their own business and they've been successful because they've provided great service or whatever that's been. And now they've reached a point where they've had to make a decision of, am I going to continue to grow this thing, or am I going to just keep doing this on my own? And so usually, very often, we end up at that point, beginning a relationship where they're saying, okay, no, I do want to grow this thing. And so now I got to get some help on the marketing side. And so at that point, very often we run into a customer who's saying, look, I have some money, and I want to grow this thing, get me leads, and that is, like my dad was, probably the most person that's the most susceptible to being burned, for sure, because they don't have enough information to even gauge what they're getting back. And so that is a very common interaction that we have at the beginning. And so one of the things that we did back in 2018 when we became sister companies, partners with Pest Routes, was we felt that it was necessary to try to get our industry closer to where, if you're in the e-commerce world and you're interacting with your customers, they buy a pair of shoes and you know exactly where they came to you from. You know how much money they spent. You have a direct line of communication. You continue to nurture them over time. I mean, it's all integrated. And yet in pest control, especially even in 2018, it was completely disconnected. There was no connection between marketing and sales and the back end software. And so that's the reason we made that move and connected with Pest Routes, was so that we could do that. So what we try to do now is we put people into a dashboard in a portal where they can see, these campaigns were run. These people fill out a form or called, and I can listen to their calls. And then I can see what happened to them. They converted, they became a customer, and they, even at this point, are paying me so much in recurring revenue or whatever that may be. And so we can track that. But along the way, we are talking with them and explaining to them what those numbers mean, because ROI and how to calculate it, and how we're calculating it, all those things are, I think, discussions and topics that young business owners like to have, and they love to soak up that knowledge. And so we try to provide that as well at the same time. But the goal is to get to a place where that blind spot is exposed, right? And now I can see, all right, that worked or it didn't work, and I can either do more of that or less of that, or redirect those funds. And so I would hope that as people leave over time, or as they grow with us over time, whichever, that if anything else, they have a much better understanding of how to evaluate what they're getting for their dollars. I think that's really important.
Well, I mean, there's a book that was recently released by Dan Sullivan, Who, Not How, right?
Yep.
And I think so many of us have been, coming through the schooling system, have been told, to be the master, you got to know the how of everything, which is a kind of a fool's errand. At least my opinion, it's a fool's errand, right? And I think that's what the book talks about.
Yeah.
Being able to find the people, the who can kind of get you there and be the subject matter expert. I mean, that's what's allowed me to kind of leapfrog where I was. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing from you is, they come in, you would like them to have a level of sophistication, understanding more than just, hey, this is about leads. This is about transforming sort of the way you connect, marketing and sales and operations, right? There's a chain there. There's a kinetic chain. One does something for this, and this does something for this, and kind of feeds back. But they can come to you. You all get that and sort of the specific how of making that happen, so that they can say, look, this is where I want to go. This is what I want to achieve, and why. You can say, yeah, I understand that. Here's step one. Did I get that right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And we at one time, we were basically a full-scale agency that didn't have plans, and kind of made, each customer came to us, they had a different, and we would kind of custom tailor. At this point, we even have plans that are based around exactly what you're saying. Of we have this base level of best practices that has to be met, and most customers that come to us don't have that, right? They have a website they threw up on their own, or whatever. So we have a level of best practices that has to be met, and so we can work towards doing that, and trying to get somebody on maybe a limited budget to just that base level, but then they can work on adding to that over time, and that's where that art comes in. Of what are we building on top of those best practices? And it needs to grow with the business, right? And the business owner's understanding has to grow with the business. Their efforts have to grow with the business. All of that has to grow with the business, and I think for us, it is a desire to be there and be a part of that. I think a lot there's one side is an owner who might not pay attention or know what they're getting back for the return. I think there's the other side of that is also the owner who is just making decisions constantly as a kind of a knee-jerk reaction of, I've got to go over here and do this. Okay, now that didn't work, and I've got to go over here and do this. And every time you do that, you're resetting what you're doing. And Google sees that and says, oh, well, you were over here and doing this, and now you're over here and doing this. And rather than sticking to best practices, sticking to what works and building on it, it's just kind of all over the place. And so I think those are the two kind of outliers, the more difficult situations we end up in. But for those that really, hey, I got to get best practices going, and then I've got to build and build and build on top of that, and use the metrics to show me what's working and what isn't. Those, we've seen them have just tremendous success over the years. And so we have customers at this point now that we worked for 10 years, and that's exciting, especially in this day and age. It's not as heard of as it once was, and it's exciting to see what that length of time doing things according to best practices has produced. It's just a big snowball that's hard for anybody else to catch up to, so.
Absolutely. Look, I'd like to stop for a quick second here, because I think we may have people listening in. I'd love to see if there's anything that you're thinking. Do you agree with Ross? Do you disagree? Are these things that are new concepts for you? Have you heard of them before? Let us know. I'm kind of curious what you're thinking, and again, where you're connecting, or where you're coming from. Got a bunch of blind spots that I've already started jotting down here. I think I'm starting to become famous on my podcast for probably capturing every third word now, because I'm writing so fast. This is good. I'm learning a lot. I want to talk about this customer journey, right? This idea of a customer that starts to learn about you. Well, at least here's the way I think of the customer journey. First of all, it's awareness. They've got to know that you exist, and that's what we've been talking about: is getting onto Google just so they know you even exist, right? Vinay's pest control company, for example, right? Once they know about me, there's that whole know, like, and trust component, right? They've got to start to see, hey, who are these guys? Are they in my neighborhood? Do they come to my area? Do they do the types of services I want? And then finally, they got to get to a decision. So awareness, engagement, ownership, or decision making. At each stage of that, the kind of conversation that you're having with them is slightly different. Talk me through how does that work? I mean, so somebody comes to Google and it says pest control near me. That's the beginning of the journey. Can you give me like an example of a company, please? Be as detail or specific or objective as you need to be. But walk me through a journey of what that story looks like. How does that work?
Yeah. So I think pest control near me works. I think a different example to start from would be like, what are these bugs in my bedroom? And so they type that in, and they're looking at that point to identify, is this thing going to, probably somebody in the house is freaking out. There's a lot of emotion involved in very often in an emergency pest control purchase, and so they're looking for an answer quickly on what is this and is it going to hurt me? And so we create a lot of content to answer those questions, especially for specific regions of the country. So they're going to land. They're going to see first. Okay, this is, you've got two paths there at that moment. This isn't going to hurt me, and it is just annoying. That's one path. this is a bed bug and I need to get out of my house right now. That is a different path. And so the person who has got that emergency situation where this is a bed bug and I want to get this out of my house right now, they're going to look to see quickly, can this company take care of me? And they're going to look for help quickly. And then it comes down to, at that point, number one, are you in my area? Can you service me? Number two, do you look professional? And number three, can I trust you? Which is a combination of, do you look professional and what have other people said about you? What are your reviews? And then the last one is, how quickly can you get here and how much do you cost, right? That's just the two that are kind of sandwiched together at the end. And so for those situations, you got to get through those as fast as you can, because somebody just wants to they're not going to shop. Those customers don't shop around. They make a quick decision on somebody getting to their house. And if you can be that person that responds to them fastest and gets there quickest, then you're going to get that work. The other path, though, is somebody who recognizes, okay, this is some type of bug that's not going to bother me, but it is annoying and I want them gone. And I don't have a pest control service right now. They're going to start to do some research, and they're going to want to know information about what the services are, and are they healthy and green. And you don't see that as much with the emergency. Nobody cares if it's hurting the environment in the middle of the night when the bug's in the bed. They just want it gone. And but those that are looking for a plan to get rid of things that annoy them, that aren't quite so threatening to them, they're going to take more time. They're going to shop. They're going to read through, how is this company going to interact with me, and how are they going to treat my home? What's going to happen? They want to know what's going to happen. But they're really at that point still looking for, who do I trust to solve this problem? And once they've established, this is the company I trust, then they'll go with that company ultimately. Usually they're not, as pest control consumers, they don't actually spend a lot of time price shopping. So going around from site to site and saying, well, this guy's the cheapest. So usually pest control purchasers are middle class or upper middle class. And so they're not as price focused.
Yeah.
They want somebody they trust to come fix the problem. But it still will then be, okay, can they service me, and when can they get here, and how much do they cost? But those are all much lower on the list than, how are they going to treat me? How are they going to treat my house? And can I trust them?
So here's what I understood from all of that, my takeaway. I'm trying to distill a lot of all that stuff that you just said, and I'm trying to unpack that into simple sentences, which is a difficult thing to do here. So I think what I heard is, you got to really start to get into your customer's shoes and understand how they think, right? What is the behavior? If they have a bug, if the question is probably, what is this bug, or what is this, rodent, whatever the case may be. The next question is, in their mind, the emotion that's going through their head, as in, do I need to get this out of my house right now? Because spouse, kids, whatever else, myself, I'm not sleeping until it is. Well, they're probably going to call you right away, and you need to be able to give them that action and respond to that. Alternatively, there's the side where someone says, all right, I got a little bit of time here. Let me find the person who I can deal with. And you got, I mean, I think there's a decision for a company to make there. Who are you really trying to service there? Right? Do you want to go at 2:00 in the morning? Well, that's fine. That's a different type of response and a different type of emotion that you're responding to. So it's ultimately about how you make these people feel, and understanding what their behavior is and helping them feel it. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially in this type of purchase.
So there's a lot of decisions for a business owner right there.
Yeah,
right?
There is. Mm-hmm.
Walk me through that decision tree a little bit. How do you guide them through that pathway? Is it something that they already know the answer to oftentimes?
Yeah, I think there's a number of aspects to discuss in that. I think, with the basics of, you then make sure your representation is one that is somebody that you yourself would want to work with, and that, those in your target demographic would want to work with. And so I think that's really important. But a lot of the decisions now, I think, that are a little deeper, that a business owner has to make is how, like you said, do they want to answer the phone, at night or on the weekends? And of course, there's services now where you can have somebody else do that for you. But for us, that is, do you want to sell pest control online? Do you want to be able to not only provide them with these other trust factors, but the ability to actually say, well, actually, I can sign up, purchase, and and schedule my time and get someone headed my way as soon as possible, um, all without leaving this website. And those are decisions that can be pretty big for a company, because they've used to doing something a certain way, or their scheduling works a certain way. And so it's not just so much about how I represent myself as far as my pictures are concerned or my information is concerned, but it's also what are the tools that I use to interact with this customer, because we're in a world now where if you have 10 customers, they want to interact with you in 10 different ways. And so it's adopt, which of those are you going to adopt, which ones fit your business, are important decisions to make as well, I think, at this point.
Well, so this brings up a really interesting point, or kind of what's going through, I'm rattling in my head as you're saying that, is just that, as a data company, we often come in to help them visualize how to change the behaviors, employees, and the company, right? I talk about the 300-watt light bulb going to a 300-watt laser. The laser is incredibly powerful, right? Because you focus the effort here. And we often come to companies and we find out that they've got a bunch of KPIs, but when we start asking them questions, is that really getting you where you want? Because we can draw those conclusions for them. They start finding out that those KPIs aren't really what they wanted. And I think I'm hearing a little bit of that here, right? These are not, changing KPIs in your company is not an easy thing to do. But once you start getting asked the right questions, you start saying, for example, production per hour, right? Lots of companies, I want to look at production per hour, but they also talk about safety. Well, which one is it? Because production per hour means they're going to drive faster. So you're giving your employees two different messages. Where I'm going with that is, as you're talking to companies, those kind of what I'll call paradoxes, or the irony of those things. Yeah, hey, look, we'll help anybody at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, no, not that. Well, I think we just said everything. All right, which one is it? Is that as they go through the process with you all? Is that part of that process, is walking them through that and saying, "Help me understand this. Help me understand this. You want to do mosquitoes, and that's what you want to do. You don't want to touch ticks, mites, bed bugs, whatever, right?"
Yep.
How long talk me through that process from when somebody first talks to you all and says, "Hey, I want to do this," and they've said, they start out with saying, "Hey, I need some more leads." You kind of smile and say, "Let me expand the picture a little bit more. It's more than just leads, right? It's picking the customers that you want and where they are." How does that process? I mean, someone comes to you. How long does that process take before someone starts seeing some results? Because I think that's what everyone wants, right?
Yeah, I think it is what everyone wants, and it's also the hardest question to answer, right? Because, for instance, somebody says, "Hey, look, I got $500 to spend. I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I want more leads for pest control." I would say use that $500 on gas, right? And go drive around and talk to some homeowners, because to rank digitally there now takes a tremendous amount of effort, right? You have companies that are spending so much money there, and so I think that it's so dependent upon what service you're offering and what part of the country you're going to be in, how much what you're trying to spend and what you're trying to get back. All of those things come into that discussion. I think one of the things you just hit on, though, was this discussion about how you want to interact with your customers. I mean, on the first side of that, of what services you actually want to offer, most companies know that when we begin to discuss with them. But do you want to sell online? Do you want to sell at all hours of the day, which can impact what time you're running your ads and all of those things? Those are the discussions that are usually that take a little more time and a little more thinking through, because a lot of times they haven't thought through that, and they saw selling online in a demo, and they thought that was really cool, but now they've got to think about how that impacts their business. And so usually that takes a little more time to process through, as far as how they want to interact and when they want to interact and what they want to actually do for their customers, than it does to determine what services they're going to offer.
So I'm trying to once again distill kind of what I'm hearing from you. There's this one part of, what do you want to focus on online, right? That's sort of some business and internal decisions, right? I only want to do bed bugs. I don't want to do bed bugs. That's a decision that's probably already been made in the company they're probably familiar with.
Yep.
then there's this whole component of Google. What are the best practices with Google? What is going to get the Google bouncer to let you in the door, right? But you got to marry those two things, and that's really where you guys. That's why while you do have sort of packages and templates that you use, it is still not one size fits all, because how this layers in with this is still different, right? Because you could have one company that says, "Hey, I want to do bed bugs, and here's how you do it." One company that doesn't want to do bed bugs, already different, right?
Yeah.
Am I saying that the right way?
Yeah, I think you hit it, because I'll give you an example of what happens often that is not a correct way of looking at it. We might end up with a company that's saying, rather than saying what you're kind of where you're going, they're saying, "Hey, I really want this button color to be, a different color or whatever," and that's where all their focus is going. Rather than on, "Hey, I've got a nice site here that is right in line with Google's best practices. It's giving me the great platform. It's tied to all these marketing operational tools that are really good. And now, how do I, as a business, figure out who these customers are that I'm targeting, and what information I'm going to present on that platform, or how I'm going to interact with them through that platform and attract them?" That's the piece that should be focused on over some of these other things that often gets a business owner's attention that are really not that important. I had a pest control owner at one time of a decent sized company, like a $5 million pest control company, tell me that they were talking with another person who had been a CEO at a big company, and he said, "Oh, we spent $2 million to determine our button colors." And I said, "Well, if you spend $2 million to determine your button colors as a pest control company, you're probably going to be out of business," because it's not relevant. It's not that relevant to you at your company size. You take the platform that is meeting all of the science, meeting all of the best practices, but interact with your customers, figure out who these customers are that you're trying to attract specifically, and think about how we're going to reach them, rather than some of these details that are not as important. And it's easy, though, to get, I think, sidetracked by things that are just not important.
One of the things I think I've learned over time is that being the smartest guy in the room is not usually, first of all, that's not has never been my strong suit. But being the smartest guy in the room is actually probably the worst position to be in, because I'm looking for others to constantly tell me how to do things better. But what's important for me is to continue to apply it. Just continue to apply it. I think 1% every day. If I can improve by 1% every day, I'm getting somewhere. 300 days, 100 days, I'm 100% better, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm hearing that as sort of a subtext here, sort of a reading between the lines. Is this is not about knee-jerk reactions, moving all kinds of stuff. Start doing it. Tweak, tune, tweak, tune, tweak, tune, and eventually, it'll be on point.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Absolutely. I think there's other avenues. Like, I want to grow really fast, well, then that's why we run Google Ads, and we just pay for customers after customer, right? Or get door knocking companies to come in, and they'll just get you, right? But when it comes to your long-term source of cheap growth, that is going to be through a natural interaction with customers, and so that is something that is built over time. It's not something that anybody can. Like my dad, you give me $4,000, I'm gonna get you on top of Google in the next few months. That's just not reality. And so it's got to be this continual movement forward. And of course, that old adage of, you want to be there already, and it's when's the best time to plant a tree, right? It's 20 years ago, but if you didn't, you should plant one today. So.
I heard a really interesting stat. I mean, this stat's probably a number of years old, probably about 7, 8 years old now, but it still resonates with me. And it was from Hubspot, which is a huge marketing company. It was their founder wrote a book. I want to say probably back in 2011. So yeah, probably 10 years ago. And he talked about this idea that the content that they've written in their blog posts, they continually put out blog posts, content, and they're constantly taking the same content and upcycling it and using it again a different way. Put the bug up at the top of the page as opposed to the bottom of the page, or to the left, or whatever else. And they said that they get 13,000 inbound leads every month. Wow, what a staggering number! He said 56% of that comes from blog posts that we wrote 6 years ago. I was like, gosh, that's great. So But you think that he also said that we have 8,000 blog posts, and he said there's probably about 25 topics, right?
Yeah.
So you're taking it and you're massaging it. You're making it a square. You're making it an octagon, whatever else, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're making it red versus yellow, blue, green, whatever.
Yep.
But over time, you build that, and what happens is people just start saying, what is this bug? Because they took a picture of it, or they see a picture on a web page, like, yeah, that's the one I have in my room right now.
Yeah.
Or that I've seen 2 times crawling through it later at night. That's the company I want to, right? So it just starts to pay dividends over time because you're
absolutely
building equity, not renting. Does that make
correct.
sense?
Yeah, it's an investment, right? And so that type of marketing is truly an investment where you're paying money every month or whatever to have this content created that is going to produce results for years and years to come. And so it's the long-term piece of your marketing investment. And I think so. The blind spot there is very obviously that then if you are doing that but thinking, well, I just produced a blog last month and it has only produced 1 lead for me, then it's worthless. No, because it's part of an overall snowball that you're pushing, and so I think that's really important to think of it the way you just described. For sure, it is those companies that have been doing that for a long time. It's not that you can't catch up, you can, but you're going to have to put in the work and think about it correctly as you build up your own lead sources. So
I use LinkedIn a lot because we provide analytics to companies so that they can actually take action, build the cultures and the strategy they want. And that message is not something that you can have in a 5-minute conversation. You got to break it into components, and different people are different parts of their journey in doing that. And it's funny, whenever people start to follow me, and I'm starting to see this real rise and influx in people who are starting to follow me, right? I'll get 5 and 6 people in a day now. 6 months ago, that wasn't the case. But when someone likes and follows me, I'll see them go back and like 6 articles. And I was like, I forgot that I didn't publish that thing so long time ago. And I think that's essentially what you're saying here is this is not something that you're trying to create to get a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Hey, I just got $50,000 in business. You'll get $50,000 in business, but it'll come over time. But it won't stop at 50,000. It'll just keep going beyond that. Yeah. Am I thinking about that the right way? Is that the right way to think about it, I guess, is the question.
Absolutely, right? I mean, we have had customers that come in, they work with us for a year or less than a year or whatever, and they have that mentality that we, even though we've been doing all these things and heading in the right direction and all these other metrics of traffic sources are growing and all of this, the bottom line, I don't feel like I got the leads, and they move on. I don't know what happens to them over time because they're not with us. But I know that the companies that have been with us for a long time, that we've continued to do these things for, now they sit back and you look at their cost per leads on a monthly basis, it's like $2, $1.50. Like, it's unbelievable. And so we're at a point now where we're seeing the value that companies have been with us 3 or 4 years that are a fraction of the cost per leads that they were either 3 or 4 years ago when we started. And so I think those things are really important to keep in mind if you're trying to grow digitally. And I don't know of many businesses that aren't at this point. So.
Yeah. It's this whole idea of, if you want to achieve mastery, they say 10,000 hours, right? And it's roughly 5 years of full time. Yeah. So if you truly want to achieve mastery in doing something, this is not something you're going to, look, there's plenty of people who do it their whole life and it takes them a while to get it. I might say there's a bit of arrogance to think, hey, I'm going to come in 1 month and boom, it's working.
Well, we, on the other side of this, we interview people to come work for us. And, it's like, I was doing this, I've been out of it for a couple of years, and immediately you start talking, and it's their mastery that they did have, they stepped out for 2 years and now they're left behind as far as the knowledge goes. So it's definitely an interesting industry for sure.
So, if you could, someone who wants to start to embark on this journey, they start to see this, they see it today, or they see it, 3 months from now, because it's on YouTube. We put a post on LinkedIn or Facebook or something like that. They see something here. What are give me maybe 1, 2, or 3 items. What are things that you wish more people knew kind of when stepping into this process that would help them? Because an educated customer is, in my mind, the educated customer is the best customer for me, right? They know what value I provide to them. What are those 1 to 3 things that you wish they knew themselves?
Well, I would say number 1 is you want to, if you're going to start building in this direction, you want to know what the results of your actions are. And so if that is, marketing and digital presence, You don't want to view it as, just a straight out one version of how many leads am I getting or whatever. There's a number of metrics that can show you what the results are, of what you're doing around traffic, all of those things that are important. So you want to be building in an environment or with a platform that is going to give you the ability to see. I mean, that's HubSpot, all of those. That's what they've made their bajillions of dollars on. They want to be in a position, number one, where you can know and understand what your results are from your actions. The second one I would say is you are either going to have to put that time in to get mastery in order to enact those best practices, or be able to have something to build that artwork on that we were talking about, or you're going to have to get a platform or a partner that's going to help you get there faster. There is really no way around that. And so there's two ways to do that. One is to get a partner that is going to do it all for you, and that's one way to go. The other is there's a lot of great tools now that can help you speed some of that up, but you're going to have to get some help unless you want to put that 10,000 hours in. And then the last one would be that just like any other purchase you're going to make, you've got to find somebody that you feel like you can trust to discuss these things with. So I don't mean that you got to come to Lobster because you can trust. I mean, whether that is somebody that's a consultant that you would trust to help you through that, or it is an agency that or just a friend that knows what they're talking about. There's somebody that you've got to that you got to get somebody that you trust to help you think through these things and evaluate what you're doing. And so it's not just the numbers. The interpretation of those numbers are really important, and that's where somebody that you trust comes in to help you through that. And the last one, I guess I would say, is make sure that you are viewing it as what I said at the beginning, that who I am digitally is who I actually am in today's commerce, that I can't ignore who I am online and expect to grow a really big, great business at this point. Who I am virtually is who I really am in today's world. So I think that's the last piece.
Yeah, some good points in there. I think the one that stuck out with me in number 2 is you need to have a time or a partner. I tell my kids that all money does is accelerate time, right? So you can spend the 10,000 hours yourself, or spend the time with somebody else, and you don't get if it's $300 a month, $500, whatever that number is, right? That you spend on a monthly spend is, you're not buying 10 hours. You're buying the 15 years of experience to get to that point where they could do it in an hour and a half. Right? Yeah. You're buying all that experience in the organization, and all the conferences and the studying of the science behind the Google and the customers and acquiring them.
Yep.
Lots of good stuff here. Ross, what I always do here, and just for anyone listening in, I always take these and I put some show notes together. I always think of this as the education of Vinay. Vinay is always trying to up his game. My game just went up another level here. And what I do is I take these and distill these into show notes, and kind of give you my 1, 2, or 3 real big takeaways for anyone, and I'll put that in the notes.
Awesome.
Ross, is there what contact, if someone wants to get in touch with you or want to start the process with Lobster Marketing? What's that information I should put in those notes? What's the best way to start to connect with you guys?
Well, this phone number 1, which is 888-891-5189. And so that one's always quick and easy. But then anybody who wants to, for any reason, can always email me. It's ross@lobstermarketing.com for sure. I'd be happy to talk.
Well, I will.
If it's sales, I'll pass you on to a salesman and we'll have that discussion. But I like to talk business or whatever else too. So feel free to email for any reason.
So I got the 888 number, and I've got Ross at Lobster Marketing. I'll put those into the links. I'll put the link to this podcast if you ever want to go back through it via my YouTube or anywhere else. To those who've been listening in, thanks for listening in. Hopefully you are furiously jotting notes like I was in up-leveling your game, like I always try to do. So thanks for listening in. Ross, thanks for spending some time and dropping many years of knowledge from the age of 18 in
Thank
terms
you
of
so much.
how to think about this. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really great conversation, and as it always is with you, and I really appreciate it. So
Well, thank you. I'm a curious sort, so I always get a lot out of these things.
I like that. It's good. Makes
Thanks,
you
Ross.
think. It's great.